At our wedding, my husband proudly announced that I would only get $50 a month to buy groceries. His words shocked me, and the happy, celebratory atmosphere instantly turned cold. "I'm so lucky to have such a cheap housemaid," he said, and I realized that's how he saw me. It felt like everything was fading to darkness. Suddenly, my father stood up and shouted, "Is that all you have to say, you jerk?" Jack, my husband, looked down on him and arrogantly said, "Don't get too cocky, old man." Jack didn't know what was coming. "My name is Sarah. I met Jack in college, and we were in the same year. After graduation, we lost touch, but when we were both 24, Jack invited me to a reunion. That night, I drank a little too much and felt sick. Jack was kind and looked after me, telling everyone not to force me to drink. I saw how much he'd changed since our college days, and he was so caring, like he treated me as if I were precious. He confessed that he'd liked me back in college and threw the reunion just to see me again. We started dating, and after a few months, I moved into his apartment. At 25, he proposed, and we got married. It turned out Jack was the heir to a large company. He never bragged about it, but people often told me I was lucky to marry him. His parents seemed really nice when we met them after our engagement, and I felt at ease. My parents were also happy about our marriage. My father, who owned a small business and had worked hard from a young age, was probably relieved that I wouldn't have to struggle financially anymore. Planning our wedding was exciting. We booked the venue and picked out my wedding dress together. But one evening, just a few months before the wedding, Jack said something unexpected at dinner. "Sarah, your cooking is always delicious. I think you'd be great at running the house as a full-time housewife," he said. I was surprised, because I had planned to continue working even after we got married. Jack had never mentioned wanting me to quit my job. He continued, "It's fine if you work part-time while doing housework and taking care of the kids. I'm sure you'd like some pocket money too." But I had been working hard at my job and wanted to keep working full-time. "I need to train a successor for the company, leave the money-making to me, and focus on being a homemaker," he said, smiling proudly like he was pleased to be the only one bringing in money. "But we don't even have kids yet. And even if we do, I still want to work. I don't want to put everything on you," I replied, trying to make him understand. My insistence seemed to upset Jack, and his face suddenly darkened. "I won't slack off on housework or raising kids, I promise," I found myself saying, because I really wanted to keep working. Jack smiled brightly and said, "Okay, if you insist, that's fine. They say women feel uneasy when they lose touch with society, so go ahead and do your best with housework and childcare." I was relieved that he agreed, but something about his words, "do your best with housework and childcare," didn't sit right with me. When I talked about it with my friends, they told me, "Jack cares about you, Sarah. He's a good husband." Their words made me feel happy, like I was being cared for, and it eased my concerns. After that, Jack and I would sometimes talk about our future. "Sarah, you're such a strong, independent woman who wants to keep working even after we get married. I'm lucky to have someone like you as my wife," he would say. His kind words always made me happy. "I'll help out with some of the housework too." "All right, I'll handle the household accounts and give you the living expenses. We'll stick to that budget each month," he added. I was touched by his offer because I had always thought managing finances was a woman's job. I felt relieved knowing I wouldn't have to do everything myself. Our wedding day finally came, surrounded by many guests. The ceremony went smoothly, and I was filled with happiness. But then, at the end of the ceremony, something shocking happened. During his speech, Jack suddenly said, "I'm going to make my wife work with only $50 for groceries every month." I was stunned, my mouth dropped open in disbelief. The other guests began whispering, and the once joyful atmosphere turned cold. Jack grinned at me, oblivious to the fact that he had just ruined our wedding. "I'm so lucky to have such a cheap maid," he said. I couldn't believe my ears. What was he talking about? I was horrified by his sudden change. I never agreed to such a ridiculous plan of only $50 for groceries. "You agreed when I said I'd handle the finances, didn't you?" he said. "Well, yes," I stammered, realizing that this might have been his plan all along. I felt like everything had just turned upside down. Then Jack said, "I let my wife say she wants to do all the housework and childcare while working full-time. I'm sure she'll be able to handle all the chores perfectly and make nutritious, filling meals for just $50 a month." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Quickly, I covered the mic with my hand and said, "Don't just say whatever you want. I won't accept this. Jack looked at me, confused. What's wrong? Didn't I tell you to do your best with the housework and childcare? Aren't you supposed to help out too? I never said anything like that, I replied. We can't live together like this. Suddenly, Jack's expression changed. His eyes grew cold, and he whispered in my ear, we're bound by this ceremony. It's too late to cancel the marriage now, right? We've already turned in our marriage certificate. Do you really want to get divorced? You're threatening me? Quit messing with me, I said, shocked. I never thought I'd argue with Jack, especially on what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. I felt full of regret and anger. My face grew hot, and tears started to well up in my eyes. This was what I had signed up for. I couldn't believe I was being treated like a servant by the man I had married. At that moment, I regretted marrying Jack. Just then, someone suddenly stood up and walked toward us. It was my father, Robert. His face was red with anger, and his eyes were filled with fury as he glared at Jack. How dare you treat my daughter like this in front of her parents? My father shouted. His voice froze the tense atmosphere, and the guests held their breath, watching the standoff between my father and Jack. What's your problem? Don't get so cocky, Jack said, looking down on my father with an evil expression I had never seen before. It sent a chill down my spine. My father was the president of a large corporation, and I was his successor. Jack's company was small, and I couldn't understand why he was acting so arrogant. When I had introduced my father to Jack, he had praised my father, saying he was a great man, even though his company was small. He had also told me that his feelings for me wouldn't change because of my family's background. I realized then that Jack had just been using sweet words to deceive me. As Jack was about to say something else to my father, we all heard the loud crash of glass shattering. Everyone turned to see what had happened. There, standing in the doorway, was Jack's father. His hand was shaking, and his face had turned an alarming shade of blue. His expression was full of panic, in complete contrast to Jack's calm demeanor. Jack's father looked like he was about to faint, his face pale and trembling. I could understand why. His son had been saying things that would anger the last person he'd want to upset. Shut up, it's all your fault, Dad, Jack snapped. Just as a father-son argument was about to break out, my father's voice echoed through the room. That's enough. For a moment, there was complete silence. Then my father calmly asked, Sarah, what are you going to do? Do you still want to marry this man? I quietly shook my head. I can't be happy marrying a man like this, a man who would treat me like a maid, trying to make me live on just $50 for food each month. I can't bear the thought of being with him. This is economic abuse, isn't it? Jack, I will sue you. I'm also going to annul our marriage. Be prepared for that. Jack seemed unfazed. What? Are you okay with being a divorcee? He sneered. Well, you're going to be one too, so we might as well share the pain. I won't hold back anymore. I had completely lost all feelings for him. Once I realized he didn't love me, I knew I couldn't stay with him under such ridiculous conditions. I'd rather be a divorcee than be treated like this. My father nodded in agreement. That's probably for the best. Then, with a cold look, my father added, as for your company, we will take appropriate action. I wonder what will happen to it now. It seemed Jack finally understood the seriousness of the situation. He dropped to his knees and begged for mercy. Please, we'll teach him a lesson. Don't cancel the marriage. Sarah was wrong. Please forgive me. I'll let you handle the housework, child care, and work however you want. I won't limit your food expenses anymore. You can even hire a maid and relax if you want. Let's go home, Dad, I said. I apologized to all the guests and returned their gift money. Then I canceled the wedding. Thanks to the skilled lawyer my father hired, we were able to sue Jack in court. The reason for our broken engagement was determined to be Jack's fault, and he was forced to pay for all the wedding costs. On top of that, I received compensation. Because he failed at securing a convenient marriage and humiliated his father by making him beg on his knees, Jack was disowned by his parents. He would never be able to become the CEO of the company now. Desperate, Jack caused trouble at work and got into legal trouble with the police. From what I heard, he ended up getting fired and, in the end, became lost, living aimlessly with no stable job. Of course, after all the deceit and being abandoned by his family, there was no chance he would ever marry into a wealthy family again. His life turned miserable. As for me, I became a divorcee, but my father introduced me to a kind and sincere young employee at his company. We've been dating, and we're planning to get married next year.